Hey, this is Brandon Steele. Welcome to the Mainsail Financial Group Podcast series, where we host industry experts and local professionals to really share some insights, some tips, tricks into the areas that we don't really get a focus on day to day. Today, we want to thank Elise Buie for joining us. Elise is a Seattle-based family and divorce lawyer, also the founder of Elise Buie Family Law Group. She kind of prides herself as a champion for maintaining civility throughout the divorce process, and Elise advocates for her clients in the best interest of their children, really helping them move forward, from a position of strength. And so we're very excited to have Elise here today. Thank you again, Elise, for joining us today.
Thanks, Brandon, for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you today.
Of course, yes. And I think where we're looking forward to tapping into your expertise is, first off, April is coming up. By the time this rolls out, we'll be in April, which is Financial Awareness Month. And so we're really looking to tapping into your expertise on how you help your clients kind of work with their kids on such tough issues to talk about financial topics as well. So very excited to have you. I think the timing works out great as well.
Yeah, and we just got notice today that the tax deadline was extended. I just saw that today.
Yeah. So actually, and that's one of the questions I'm going to have for you too, is around taxes and how to have, those types of discussions with kids. But maybe before we get too far down that path, I want to just back way up and, kind of start on a high level. So I know finance is not the easiest of topics. And obviously divorce is not either, which is, where you have a lot of your conversations with your clients. So I guess, as far as the similarities, where I'd like to start is just to kind of get your thoughts on how to approach these types of, really difficult conversations with your kids. How do you kind of even start that?
Well, I think having the conversation about finances with your children is critical. I think it's part of helping them grow into independent adults. And I don't know if you know, or our listeners, I have 6 children, 4 biological children, 2 step. And so making sure my children were financially literate was an extremely important thing for me. And it was important for them. And I think that having those difficult conversations, helping them, I like to think of it as not so much a quote unquote difficult conversation, but a conversation where they're going to be empowered with information that might feel big to them at the time, but it is going to be game changing for them moving forward. And we as a family were very upfront and very direct about things. We had very early conversations and regular conversations. I'll never forget a conversation with my daughter one time. She came out in some outfit and she was like in 8th grade. And I remember thinking like, oh no, you're not wearing that outfit to school. Like that is not happening. And I said, who bought those clothes? And she was like, well, I did. And I said, well, you just wasted all your money because, those are not living in our home anymore and they're gone. And so, but it gave us a larger conversation around priorities and money and how does she spend her money and how do you make wise decisions with your money so that you're not throwing it away down the road. And so he always gave the kids clothing allowance. That was one of those funny things. I don't love to shop at all. And I found shopping with children to be kind of torturous. And so I found giving them a clothing allowance and allowing them to then budget their money and, do those things like look for sales, figure out, when's a good time to buy certain clothes, like buying summer clothes in the fall and, all those little tips and tricks. But it really helped them. And there's so many things that kids need to know about money, I think, to be able to be adults. And my goal was to raise independent adults.
Sure. Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. It's one of the things that we try and help to some degree as well, without getting too involved in the personal family matters. But you mentioned, for yourself that you guys went down kind of that allowance route. So it sounds like, and maybe let me back up and ask you, do you believe that it is important to kind of expose kids to money directly early on so that they kind of get a feel for it and see what that actual experience is?
I do. I was not, personally, and I'm not making any judgment. Obviously, people have all kinds of reasons to do things. I was not a personal fan of just giving my children money for no reason. like it had to have a basis. And my children also were very independent in that they all had chores. I mean, and in my mind, it was a significant amount of chores, but I mean, in reality, you know, maybe an hour a day, but I mean, they were expected to do chores and they were expected to take responsibility for their chores. And so that meant sometimes, you know, with the number of kids we had, like if somebody wasn't going to be around, or maybe they had other plans, they would trade chores with each other and they would have to pay each other to do their chores, you know, so they learned kind of this whole mindset around they had a job to do. It was up to them to complete it. But if they couldn't complete it, they needed to figure out a way to delegate that task to somebody else. And I mean, I've joked for years that, I mean, I learned to delegate by having children and teaching them, me delegating to them, and then also me teaching them to delegate to each other. And I think that that is a really good skill, you know, to learn. I don't know if you've read, there's that book, I can't remember exactly, but I think it's called like Who, Not How, but just the whole idea of delegating and being able to, you know, use delegation to kind of scale whatever you're doing, because one person can't do everything, even in the home.
That is awesome. And I think that, you know, to your point, like, I feel like we learn so much as we teach things too.
Oh, yeah.
This is almost like kind of full circle, because as parents teach, I think they also learn a little bit about some of these areas in more detail.
Absolutely.
When you brought up a really good point though, too. I love that, you know, with your kids, you kind of like, you gave that allowance, but you didn't give it, like you made them earn it. And I think that's really important. How do you kind of solidify to make sure that they know that what they're getting is from work? Does that make sense where I'm going with that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, there needed to be a connection. And I mean, we had conversations about what certain chores were worth. I mean, I would put a price on chores. And so I had my oldest biological child as a daughter, and then 3 boys. And there were often times where the boys in particular, they would want some fancy lacrosse stick or something. And I'd be like, well, great. You know, here's your chore list and feel free to go do all those things, find out how much your lacrosse stick is worth, and then, you know, earn it. And then I'll be happy to take you to go get it. But I got that type of, you know, lesson in helping them understand that things don't just come automatically was important. I mean, we had a situation, I mean, this was one of those just kid things that you cannot, you know, it just happens. My son, we had bought a big screen TV. I mean, I think we had owned it maybe a matter of like a week. And my child, he was 13 at the time, literally came up to my room and he was so upset. He was like, I was playing lacrosse with the ball and the dog and it broke the television. And he was so upset because he knew it was a big expensive item. And I was so just unpulsed, but I was like, well, no worries. I said, I'll go get another one and we will, you know, get that set up. And I said, but, you know, you won't be able to watch it because you're going to have to pay for it. And he was just like, what? Like, I'm going to pay for it? I was like, well, yeah. I said, but I can go, you know, put it on a credit card. And so I said, well, let's look at the interest. So I pulled out my credit card statement. I had him go through, we figured out what the interest would be depending on how many months it took him to pay it off. And he was like, well, why can't I watch it? And I said, well, one, you should be working because you'll need to be earning the money to pay it off. So you're kind of going to be busy. And 2, I said, that's just not how life works. I mean, I said, you know, until you can pay for something, you can't have it. Like, you know, you need to be able to pay for it. And he was like, well, why aren't you more mad about it? And I was like, oh, there's no reason to be mad. I said, this is the kind of thing that would happen. Like if you were in college and, you know, you broke your roommate's TV, your roommate's not going to like freak out, but he's going to expect you to buy him a new TV in about an hour. And then that's going to be up to you to deal with the consequences. And I was like, so this is just kind of a fast forward life lesson. You're getting it at 13. And so we did that. We bought the TV. He didn't watch it. He worked for months and we lived in Minnesota at the time. There was a lot of snow plowing going on for him to be able to pay off that TV. But I mean, it was a great lesson in so many different things, you know, like credit card, the interest, how long it takes to pay things off. What do you do when you break something? You know, and how do you go about fixing it? And I mean, no need to get angry. Like when you break something of somebody else's, you replace it.
Yeah, I think that's awesome because, you talked earlier about the actual having them directly handling the money, but this is another way I think to really show it without that too, where you can show the real life scenario for something that's important to them, right? I mean, obviously TV.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm curious, as you talk about these different ways that you've taught your kids in the past, do you feel like there is any sort of line where you're kind of overexposing kids to money? And if so, what does that look like?
I mean, obviously I can only speak from my own experience and from my children. And so, I look at, my youngest is 18, the oldest is 29. And they all have been exposed fairly heavily, to the idea of money, to earning money, to taxes, to the cost of insurance, to the cost of, electric bills, water bills. Like, we discuss the cost of living, and we've discussed it when we've lived in different cities, that different cities have different cost of living. My children would say no, that they would not overexpose. They all have actually said how much they appreciate their money savvy, that they all went to college with money in the bank. I mean, my oldest daughter, started college with more than $20,000 in savings from working all through high school. And that money allowed her to literally travel the world all the time during college. And she thinks it, completely changed her life. She wouldn't have had that opportunity, had she not earned that money. And so I think in general, my children have really appreciated understanding the value of a dollar. And they all have been very hardworking. All my children have started working in middle school, whether it's babysitting, coaching in some way, working as a counselor, or doing that counselor and training program at Magnuson, at Arena Sports. But they all have worked, and I look at them now, they're all young adults. Like I said, they're all in that 18 to 29, every single one of them, except the 18-year-old who's going off to college. They all have, excellent jobs, savings. They all have investment accounts. And and every single one of them is like savings to buy a house, which to me at that age is pretty impressive, they have some real savvy around money, and it's given, they're just very independent. Like I do nothing for any of them. Do you know what I mean? Like they've all gone to college. They've all had a small student loan. That was something we felt was important, that we paid for college, but they all had to have some skin in the game. And they've all paid their student loans. They're, saving money and doing really well. And so to me, that's kind of cool because, 5 out of 5, that's not bad.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. I grew up kind of in a completely different setting. It wasn't my parents' fault, but they didn't have a lot. And so obviously financial education was not top of the list.
Right.
So, I had to learn the hard way. There's definitely an easier way to do it. So we've talked a lot about some of the starting points. We talked about like savings. We talked about interest. I'm going to get to taxes here in a minute, but before I do, I think one of the most important lessons we can all learn early on is compounding.
Oh,
so can you maybe talk to that a little bit? Like, how you might suggest sharing those types of lessons?
Oh, well, I think those are awesome to share. And we have found starting in high school, it's a great time. We've gotten our kids investment accounts. And when we get to that high schoolish age with our children, we usually stop buying them gifts per se at Christmas. They kind of have all the stuff they need. You know what I mean? Like they have activities, they're doing whatever. And so we would start putting money in their investment account. And so that allowed them to play with it and learn. And we didn't have any thought that, when they were going to college, they would have a bunch of money. For us, it was more of here's an opportunity for them to learn about stocks and bonds and, follow Market Watch and, get involved with their money. Like my son now, the one who's a senior, he's been investing money and he has been, sometimes sometimes he goes way up and then he'll, come and show me. And he's like, oh, I had a big dip today, with my Tesla stock. And I'm like, that happens. And so, but I think it's a great opportunity for them to understand what can happen and, doing the math. I mean, I homeschooled my children for years as well. And understanding compounding interest was, part of our math lessons, and really helping them understand that when you put a certain amount in and when you watch it grow over time, I mean, those first dollars in can make all the difference to a person, when they're 50 or 60 and they want to retire. I mean, even if, it was just $100 a month from babysitting, I mean, can really add up.
Sure. Yep. That is huge. I think the earlier we can all learn that, I mean, you can just be years and years and years ahead.
Oh, it's tremendous. Yeah.
So let's spend some time on the hard one now. So taxes, because I feel like, I guess the angle I want to approach this is, how do you teach that without kind of like imposing beliefs, if that makes sense as well?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, people can go on all kinds of political things on taxes. I mean, and we don't need to go there. But I think that, unfortunately, I mean, we had a real life lesson in taxes. I mean, I went through a situation with my ex-husband, who was a self-employed attorney. And I won't bore you with all the details, but I came to understand one day that we had not been paying our taxes, that I'd been signing documents, but those had not been going to the IRS, those checks. So I had to engage with the IRS in an offer and compromise and really get involved in our taxes in a way that I hadn't before. And that all happened congruently with Hurricane Katrina, which we evacuated. We lived in New Orleans at the time. We evacuated with Hurricane Katrina, went to this rural town in Georgia where my ex's family lived. And I literally spent 3 months with all of our documents on a table as I was working with the IRS. So my children, unfortunately, got a real taste of taxes. And I mean, it's kind of a joke now. I have a daughter who works in DC, and she's like, I think I have PTSD about taxes. I mean, she was a contractor for Pete Buttigieg during his campaign. And so she was always putting aside, the highest amount possible for her taxes, because she's like, I am never going to get caught not paying taxes. And I'm like, there you go. And, so they unfortunately did have a really, I mean, just a hard life lesson to watch, but they also got to understand, about taxes. And again, it's unfortunate, but it's helpful. They understand about penalties. They understand about all the things that can go into taxes. And so, I mean, they definitely understand the import of, saving, following the rules, making sure they're doing things timely. I mean, I have a son who's a recon Marine who's in Japan, and he texted me this morning and he goes, okay, we need to discuss the status of our taxes. Is this something the regular CPA is doing this year, or should I be seeking a CPA in Japan? And I was just laughing because I was like, well, look at you.
Yeah,
totally
he's on top apparently. That's great.
Yeah. So taxes are a fact of life. I mean, it doesn't matter what your politics are. Taxes are going to be there. So we might as well get used to them and handle them appropriately.
I think you have a good point too, that, by teaching that just taxes in general, they also learn things about, the timeliness of things. Like there's some other lessons, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So how about, this is obviously maybe a little more personal one, but, I think giving is something that's obviously really important. And so I guess I'm just kind of curious, I guess this ties in with everything else, maybe rounds out the scope of things here, but how do you maybe teach those types of values early on? And obviously, you don't want to tell them who or what to give, but that giving is important and ways to, to structure that.
Well, I mean, for me, giving was extremely important. And I mean, the way I taught giving was by modeling giving. And so my children always, saw me, whether it was physical labor, like going to the Minnesota State Fair and picking up trash, or, going and giving food out at, food shelters, or it was inviting a young pregnant person into our home to, live with us for months while she got through her pregnancy, but having those kinds of just I mean, those types of things were just part of who we were. And so my children got to see that, witness it, and participate in it. And then, now, I mean, I have watched in return, what my children do. And I mean, I'm kind of awestruck by how they see giving. And it's different for all of them. Every single one of them is different. I mean, some of them, it's much more personal, like they're kind of going to mentor a younger person that for whatever reason might need help. And I mean, that's going to be like inviting them over for dinner and, doing things and really being there for them. I had a daughter who, when we moved to Seattle, created all these homeless bags because she was just horrified by the number of homeless people she saw here. So she went to Target with all her babysitting money and created these little bags that had like socks and shampoo and, certain things. And she kept them in the car. And so she would just give them out all during her senior year. And I just thought, well, that's really cool. There she is working, but also sharing. And I think giving is such a personal thing, that people need to kind of come to it. But I mean, as a parent, I kind of think we model it in how we are. And, I don't mean to say all fatalist, like either they're going to pick up on it or they're not, but kind of they're either going to pick up on it or they're not. I mean, I don't think forced giving would work very well, at least not in our family. We created some pretty democratic, free thinking lawyer type people. And so, they're going to have to come to all that on their own.
Yeah. Well, that makes plenty of sense though. I mean, be the role model and let them be, be their own person from there. I think that makes a lot of sense. Okay.
I think that's so true in so much parenting. I mean, I joke all the time now that one of the biggest things when the last child is gone, I'm going to be messy for a year. I'm going to just like mess up my den. I'm going to even leave dishes in the sink one night and just let them stay there till the morning, because I feel like I've spent, I don't know how many years now trying to be a role model around, keeping the house clean and being always cleaning up after yourself. And do you know what I mean? All those things. And so I think I'm going to take a break from that.
I think that sounds fair, at least for a year anyway. Well, I think that's maybe a good place to start wrapping up. So first off, thank you again so much. I think there was a lot of good stuff here today. But if anybody does have any questions for you or needs your services in any way, is there a good way for them to get in touch with you?
Sure. I mean, you could go to our website is probably the best, Elise Buie Family Law Group. And then there's email, you can reach me on there. There's email address, and we can be sure to get my email out into the notes of this show so that, if you need anything. And we have a lot of resources on our website. I mean, dealing with families, co-parenting issues, estate planning. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that we can do to help families as they navigate many of the transitions that people go through when they're involved in, needing a divorce attorney.
Great. Yeah. And I think it's clear through the conversation today, it's done in a very educational way. So I think this is really helpful. And again, thank you so much for your time today.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Brandon, for having me. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks a lot. You too.
Okay.
And thank you guys all for joining us for this month's session. If you have any questions for us, you can email us info@mainsailfg.com.